Hello everyone, Natlan has just recently been officially released with patch 5.0, but the 5.1 beta has also started, so we finally got our first info on Xilonen, the one and only 5-star coming in patch 5.1. And even though it's only the first week of beta, her kit already looks insanely strong. Simply put, Xilonen is literally a Geo version of Kazuha that also heals, and I think just that description alone tells you that she's very likely to be a meta-defining unit and thus one of the best 5-star units in the game. So let's get right into explaining her initial kit. As always, remember that this is very early information, so very subject to change. Xilonen is a 5-star Geo sword user that ascends with defense. Like all natlan characters, she plays around the Night Soul mechanic and has mobility built within her kit. She can either play like an on-field DPS or an off-field support, though her supportive capabilities are the main highlight of her kit. Everything about Xilonen revolves around her elemental skill. When you press her skill, Xilonen takes off her coat, gets on her roller skates, and enters Night Soul's Blessing with 45 Night Soul points. These Night Soul points will gradually decrease, and Night Soul's Blessing will end once the points drop down to 0 or 9 seconds has passed. During this enhanced state, Xilonen gets increased move speed, can climb walls faster, and her normal attacks will get infused with Geo and get defense scaling. However, the main part of her skill is her source sample mechanic that gives her supportive capabilities. After Xilonen enters Night Soul's Blessing with her skill, she does damage and gains 3 Geo samplers. These samplers can be changed into different elements depending on whether you have Pyro, Hydro, Electro, or Cryo units in your party, and when the samplers are activated, they provide Res Shred for that specific element. At talent level 9, Xilonen gives 33% Res Shred. For context, Zhongli's Shred from his shield is 20%, while 4-piece Viridescent Venerer is 40%. The Res Shred is automatically applied to enemies near your character, and the range is about the size of a Ganyu burst, so it has a pretty good range. To visualize how this mechanic works, one example team is a Molani Burn Vape team with Emily, Xiangling, and Xilonen. Here, 2 of the Geos become Hydro and Pyro, and the 3rd stays Geo because Dendro doesn't interact. When all samplers are active, Xilonen gives Hydro, Pyro, and Geo Res Shred. Another example team is a Nivelette team with Farina, Xiangling, and Xilonen. In this scenario, 2 of the Geos become Hydro while the 3rd becomes Pyro. When all samplers are active, Xilonen gives Hydro and Pyro Res Shred. Samplers do not stack, so you don't get double Hydro Res Shred in this scenario. This Res Shred is extremely strong. However, Xilonen must activate the samplers first to give the Res Shred, and after using her skill, none of them are actually active except if you have a Geo one, which will be active only while Xilonen is on field and is in Night Soul's Blessing. In order to activate the Res Shred for other party members, Xilonen must reach the maximum number of Night Soul points she can hold, which is 90. However, Xilonen starts with 45 and constantly drains Night Soul points, so how do you gain them? The only way you can is through her A1 passive, which enhances Xilonen's normal attacks while in Night Soul's Blessing. If only 1 or less of the Geo samplers change their element, Xilonen's attacks gain 30% extra damage. However, if 2 or more of the Geo samplers change elements, then each of her hits generate 35 Night Soul points. Thus, starting at 45 Night Soul points, you only need to attack twice on Xilonen to get the 90 Night Soul points needed. Once she gets 90 Night Soul points, she instantly drops to 0 points and their enhanced state, but activates all her source samplers, giving Res Shred of their corresponding element to nearby enemies for 15 seconds, which works even when Xilonen is off field. Lastly, her skill currently generates 4 Geo particles. Xilonen's skill alone makes her an extremely powerful support. However, for some reason, HOYOMiX decided to also make her a strong healer as well with her elemental burst. It just does AoE damage, but it can heal if you meet the same requirement of her A1, which is having at least 2 characters in your party that are Pyro, Hydro, Electro, or Cryo. The healing can only heal the active character, so it isn't team-wide. However, the defense scaling on it is pretty high. At around 3k defense, you get around 7k healing. On top of that, the healing burst lasts for 13 seconds and heals every 1.5 seconds, so you get 8 ticks of around 7k healing on your active character. And if you include healing bonus from a Circlet or Farina's Fanfare, the healing gets even higher. Now, if you have less than 2 characters in your party that are Pyro, Hydro, Electro, or Cryo, the burst doesn't heal, it just does 2 extra hits of damage. In summary, Xilonen needs at least 2 other characters in her party that are Pyro, Hydro, Electro, or Cryo in order for her to give the 15-second off-field resistance shred for the corresponding elements and allow her to heal with her burst. The Molani Burn Vape team example meets this requirement with Molani and Xiangling. However, in an Ito team with Chiori, Yelan, and Xilonen, Xilonen's burst doesn't heal and she cannot activate her 15 seconds of Res Shred because you only have 1 Hydro in this team. Lastly, let's cover the remaining 2 passives. Her A4 passive is quite interesting. Just like other natlan A4s, Xilonen gets a buff when Night Soul Burst is triggered. In this case, it's a defense buff. However, this A4 also states that when Xilonen reaches full Night Soul points, she will trigger an effect which counts as an additional Night Soul Burst. Remember that Night Soul Burst has a cooldown depending on the number of natlan characters you have. This passive allows you an additional stack that is separate from this normal cooldown, which allows characters like Molani and Kanich to get additional stacks for their buffs, which is nice. The special passive is, as as always, an exploration passive, allowing Xilonen to stay in Night Soul's Blessing in the overworld and not consume stamina while climbing walls during the enhanced state. With the elemental requirements, we can see that one is focused on team support, while one is focused on Xilonen's personal damage, so you could technically play Xilonen as a DPS where she primarily uses her defense scaling infused geo attacks. It's nice that this is an option and you can do this for fun, however in most cases her on-field damage is not looking amazing, so generally her best build will just be a full support healer. Thus, talent priority will be skill first to increase the res shred, then burst to increase her healing. In terms of her support gameplay rotation, it's short and simple. You skill to enter Night Soul's Blessing, normal attack twice to reach 90 Night Soul points and activate her res shred, burst if you need the healing, then swap out. Next, let's cover Xilonen's initial beta constellations. Her C1 extends her Night Soul's Blessing duration. This part is only relevant for main DPS Xilonen enjoyers and for overworld exploration. In addition, when her res shred is active, the party gets interruption resistance, the same level as Huta's skill. Next, her C2. At first glance, this looks really OP, but if you take a closer look, I don't think this constellation is as strong as it may seem. On top of giving elemental res shred to the corresponding elements of your team, C2 also gives an additional buff to the characters that match that element. For example, in a Malani Burn Vape team, you would activate Hydro, Pyro, and Geo res shred. With C2, Malani gets 40% HP, Xiangling gets 40% attack, and Xilonen gets 30% crit rate. And this example shows that C2 isn't Omega insane. Crit rate is irrelevant for Xilonen as a support, and Xiangling is building ERs since she's primarily there for Pyro application, so the attack isn't very relevant. So the biggest buff is 40% HP for Malani, which is nice, but that's it. Now obviously other teams can take better advantage of the C2, for instance the crit rate and crit damage buffs of Geo and Cryo, and potentially the burst cooldown reduction of Electro, but ultimately Xilonen C2 does vary in performance and isn't a completely broken constellation. C3 increases Xilonen's skill talent level by 3, C4 gives Xilonen 6 coordinated attacks after using your skill that can be activated by anyone in the party when they use normal charged or plunging attacks, C5 increases Xilonen's burst talent level by 3, and lastly C6 gives Xilonen even more Night Soul's Blessing uptime for massive on-field damage, a classic on-field DPS C6 for a support just like a Yelan style C6. Next, let's cover Xilonen's potential builds. Her signature weapon is interesting. It gives a lot of defense as a substat, and for the special passive it gives crit rate and crit damage for Xilonen's normal and plunging attacks, and gives the team elemental damage bonus, all of which scale off of Xilonen's defense. 3200 defense is needed to max out these buffs. A DPS focused Xilonen can take full advantage of the signature, but as a support, Xilonen isn't a good damage dealer, so the crit doesn't matter. The team-wide damage bonus is the most important thing here, and the funny thing is that this damage buff can make the weapon better than Xilonen C2 for team damage. Another 5-star support weapon you can use is Freedom Sworn. The ICDs of her enhanced normals do work out so that you can proc both of the sigils to get the buffs. However, I think the general best weapon for Xilonen is going to be Favonius Sword. As always, Favonius is an amazing support weapon that is more accessible than the 5-star options. You could use the natlan craftable for more defense, which increases her healing, but the ER from Fav will generally be better. For main DPS Xilonen, any DPS oriented sword that gives stats like crit, damage percent, or defense are fine. For artifact stats, as a natlan support, 4-piece scroll is a no-brainer and will be your main set. With this set, not only does Xilonen shred elemental resistance, but she also gives damage bonus of crystallized elements for the team, making her the Geo version of Kazuha. For artifact stats as a support, defense or ER hourglass, defense goblet, then healing bonus circlet or crit rate for Fav. Substats focus on crit rate if you have Fav, then as much ER as you can, then defense. If you're a main DPS enjoyer, then you can go 4-piece obsidian codex and go defense hourglass, Geo goblet, crit circlet, typical DPS setup for a defense scaler. Finally, let's cover Xilonen's potential team comps. Because of her A1 passive, you need at least 2 other characters in your party that are Pyro, Hydro, Electro, or Cryo in order to activate Xilonen's elemental res shred. If you don't meet this requirement, Xilonen doesn't give the team res shred. And because Xilonen doesn't give res shred to Anemo or Dendro, she will not be played in teams where the main DPS is Anemo or Dendro. The types of teams that don't meet the element requirement will typically be where Xilonen is the primary DPS, and currently one of the only teams where DPS Xilonen actually looks pretty good is with Furina and Xinyan for plunge DPS Xilonen, but otherwise Xilonen should primarily be a support in her teams. If you can imagine any team that has Kazuha or to a lesser extent Zhongli in it, you can replace them with Xilonen and it will be at minimum a good side grade option, but she can just be a better option. So many characters can utilize Xilonen since she's a strong general support, so it's hard to specifically describe all her good teams, but here are a few examples. Navia double pyro teams deal more damage with Xilonen as the last slot over Zhongli or Kachina. Malani Vape teams got a significant buff with Xilonen, especially when paired with Furina because Xilonen's healing is able to keep up with Furina's HP drain. You can replace Kazuha in a mono pyro team with Xilonen and the team performs very similarly. Even freeze teams can utilize Xilonen since there's no off-field geo application to shatter the freeze away. And lastly, Xilonen doesn't have to be a replacement to Kazuha. They can be paired together, making an extremely strong support duo. For instance, the best Nivulette team currently in terms of damage is with Furina, Kazuha, and Zhongli. If you replace Zhongli with Xilonen, the team just gets even better. That's everything I wanted to cover on Xilonen. In her current state, Xilonen is an extremely powerful and meta-defining unit with her ability to shred the resistance to specific elements, give the team damage bonus through 4-piece scroll, and be a strong single target healer. She is pretty much a Geo Kazuha in terms of the buffs she provides and how she fits into teams. If we compare the two directly, they both give similar amounts of resistance shred and damage bonus to their team. Thus, the damage they provide to a team are quite similar. However, the main difference is the uptime of these buffs. Xilonen's buffs last significantly longer than Kazuha's. In addition, Kazuha requires you to swirl specific elements on enemies. All Xilonen has to do is trigger crystallize once for 4-piece scroll, and then once her red shred is activated, stand near enemies for them to have their resistance to shred, making her much more consistent in multi-wave content. And lastly, Xilonen provides heals while Kazuha is still the king of grouping. Thus, to me, Xilonen doesn't outright power creep Kazuha, but is an equal alternative to him. However, when grouping isn't needed, I do think that Xilonen will generally perform as a better buffer for most players due to her easier access to buff uptime. Swirl setups and refreshing VV shred can get very complicated, and for some characters like Milani, it's hard to perform the correct setups in practice, but with Xilonen, you don't have to worry about this. Thus, most players should be able to easily take full advantage of what Xilonen can bring to a team. Ultimately, Xilonen currently looks like a top 5 character in the game, joining the likes of Kazuha, Furina, and Yelan. However, keep in mind that this is just the first version of Xilonen's kit. Having Kazuha level buffs and the ability to heal a lot seems a bit too good to be true. Since Milani got immediately nerfed in her beta, I wouldn't be surprised if the same happened with Xilonen, but we'll just have to wait and see what HOYOverse decides to do with Xilonen in the upcoming weeks. I hope this initial overview and analysis on Xilonen's kit was helpful to y'all. If you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments and I'll try to clarify anything. If you like this type of pre-release content, drop the video a like or sub to the channel, it helps me out a ton. I also have a small Discord server, so if you want to discuss more about Xilonen, feel free to join and chill. And with that, I hope you all have a wonderful day.